I'm Dave Wiesdock, Sage of Creative Scaffolding.
And I'm Jen West, Professional Rebel of Delight.
And this is Shadowcasting. Welcome back to another episode of Play Mindset. Of Shadowcasting. Tricked you guys. Today we're going to be talking about Play Mindset. And if you have been listening for the past couple weeks, you know that this is the 5th episode in our series. This is a tool that was developed by our very own Jen West. If you haven't listened to this podcast yet, we highly encourage you to go check out the first 4 episodes, including an introduction episode where we talk about how this play mindset was developed, where it came from, and really the process behind this new tool that we've been discussing. And because it's such a big tool and an ability for us to use it in so many different areas in our life, we decided to spend an episode on each part of it to really dive deep into how you can use these qualities. That's the word I was looking for. I kept saying tool. How you can use these qualities within yourself to go from what we call a survival cycle, which is where you feel like everything is happening to you, into a fulfillment cycle where you're more future focused, where you're more present and looking towards how you can make changes in your life, where you take ownership. And ownership is going to be a huge thing in today's podcast, but we'll get there. So we have these 2 cycles where we can be in the past and in our survival cycle, or we can be in our fulfillment cycle. And you might be asking, how do we move from one cycle to the other? And the way that we do that is through this thing called play mindset, which Jen came up with from studying James Carse and the Infinite Game, and the idea that we can bring play into our life. And play is actually an acronym. It stands for the practice, P, that shines a light, L, on actions, A, that support you, Y. So we have our play mindset. But before we get into the podcast today, in case it's been a minute since you've listened to the past episodes, or maybe you're jumping into this one and this one spoke to you and you want to just listen to the material here, we're going to briefly go into a recap of our last few episodes. And I thought Jen would kick that off for us.
Sure. Yeah. This is so much fun because this is, it's the thing Dave and I talk about. The tool for this week is what we live on. It was our 3rd podcast episode. But to recap, so that people can catch up, we started with first getting into our bodies and noticing whether we're in anxiety or we're in excitement. And we learned the tool discomfort to get into our body, to hear the mental noise and to lean into that. Then we learned about awareness, and we learned that awareness is what wakes us up out of autopilot. And that gets us into present, where we can actually start to see reality as it is. And then once we can see stuff, we have to step into a state of non-judgment. And this pulls us out of fear and moves us into compassion. And it gets us out of that binary thinking. We start to see things for what they are, and then we can make meaning on it, not based about good or bad, right or wrong, those kind of things. And then the last episode we did was on acceptance. And that's looking at reality as it is, making peace with what is, because it is. You can move forward, but you can't change what just is right now. And so that takes us from blame and puts us into balance. And this week, we're playing with our very favorite tool. We are moving from being the victim to having power through personal responsibility. And if you're longtime listeners, like I said, we've already done a full-blown podcast on this in our 3rd episode, where we explore the victim and we explore power and we explore personal responsibility deeply. So highly recommend go back and listen to that one. We're going to touch on some of the ideas from that, but we're going to hopefully add more depth and a new line today. And then we also did an episode that has personal responsibility on our episode 20, which was levels of consciousness. And that one was super fun, but it had more of a spiritual bent. And it took personal responsibility from just owning ours stuff to owning reactions in other people and just like a deeper, more spiritual side. That one was really fun. What do you think, Dave?
I think that that's a great way of showing how over, gosh, the past year and a half now, that these tools show up in so many of our episodes and in different ways. And again, I said at the beginning how powerful and just big this tool is. And I think that really shows it, when we're discussing other topics, other categories, other ways to grow and improve ourselves, these tools show up. And so I think the fun for the audience might be to look at that as we go through future podcasts. Where are Jen and Dave at in the survival cycle? What tool are we working on today? Where is that coming up? And you might be surprised. And if you're listening with friends and family, maybe a different tool came up for them depending on what we're talking about. A great example is the levels of consciousness. I think that that does really highlight personal responsibility, but there's other tools that I think apply very well with there too, like acceptance, for example,
Yeah.
or other qualities like acceptance.
It's so fun because it just depends on the lens. Like today, we are going to explore again personal responsibility, but this time we're changing the context. We've been doing all this inner work to first recognize our bodies, to get present in the moment, to not initially judge something, and to accept where we are in the moment. Now, rubber meets the road. This is where we start deciding who we want to be. And we're going to play today because we've already talked about generally personal responsibility. We're going to talk about building character and what it means, what our character is like when we're in victim, and what our character is when we're in power, and how personal responsibility really helps us cultivate that and really become the person we want to be, whatever that personality is.
Absolutely. And I believe in order to know what personal responsibility looks like and how it shows up for us, we have to look at the other side of it first, right? And so our first dive is into that or into the survival cycle. And when we're not in personal responsibility, that's the victim. And one of the concepts that I love to play in and around and with are the loci of control. And a lot of people know about like external loci, things that are outside of us, versus internal loci, things that are inside of us. So an external loci of control might be a parent to their child, right? Something outside is telling the kid what to do. An internal loci of control might be, I want to, I don't know, work on this podcast because I am internally motivated to share how to celebrate humanity and how to practice casting the shadow that we cast. However, there's a different concept that I think comes to play here that I would love just 5 seconds to talk about with you guys as the audience, and that is the circles of control, concern, and influence. And the way to think of these circles is less like a Venn diagram where there's like a little bit that overlaps, and more like a nesting kind of Russian doll concept where each circle is kind of within a bigger circle. So the biggest circle is our circle of concern, right? So that's anything that peppers us throughout the day. The dishwasher breaks, the breaking news that comes out, or a weather report, or anything that we can't directly have any impact over because we don't have that kind of power, influence, control, or ability. And so, we can't change the weather. We can't change what a certain policy is enacted or whatever in the bigger political scheme. And so those are all the biggest circle, the circle of concern. Then you have the second circle, a smaller circle within that called the circle of influence. And for that circle, that's where there's like a little bit of a give and take. Maybe you can have a conversation with someone to share your perspective, and maybe that influences how that person acts, hence the name, the circle of influence, but it doesn't directly control their actions. And so, a great example of this is like a conversation with a friend. Like when Jen and I talk and we do work with each other, I think that's in the circle of influence because we're sharing concepts and ideas and philosophies back and forth until you get to where the solution is that you want to take action on with your personal responsibility, which takes us to the smallest circle or that most inner circle in this concept, called the circle of control. And that is the most inner circle because that is you. In in truth of reality, the only person and the only thing you can control is you, your behaviors, your actions, your responses, your reactions, your emotions, your thoughts, your habits. That is all what you have control over and what you can influence. And I think a large part of our podcast, especially a focus on personal responsibility, teaches us that our control is within ourselves. However, just true to shadow casting and celebrating our humanity, by learning to control ourselves and to work on ourselves, that spreads out because these circles aren't in isolation, right? By focusing on ourselves, it changes how we influence others and how others influence us. And by a larger extension, it changes what we become concerned about, what we don't become concerned about. And it releases some of that pressure to try to control things that are outside of our control. And in that reason, and the reason that I took this little detour is because for me, that's how the victim shows up with this external loci of control. Are you focused on the things you're trying to influence and the things that are a concern of you? Or are you focused on the things you can actually control and change? And the difference there is going to be that victim mindset versus power. If you are in your control, then you are in that having power part of your survival cycle. And if you are more focused on the things you can control, the things that you'd rather influence, or the things that are making you doom scroll at 2 a.m., then you're not in your survival cycle. You are in your survival cycle, rather. You're in that victim mindset. So, anyways, that's kind of what came up for me with the victim mindset. What about for you, Jen?
Yeah, and that's a very good lead in because it's really important as we move forward that those levels, those circles are in your mind because it's what's going to allow you to develop yourself. Because if you're stuck in influence and concern, you're trying to control things you have no control over. And then you're resentful and you're mad and you start to, well, you go back to the blame, which is part of that survival cycle. You're in the blame because people aren't changing. I mean, how many times, I'm sure everybody's done it. You're like, I could see exactly what this friend needs to do to fix their life. And if they would just listen to me, their life will be better. But that's a circle of influence. And if they're far enough away, it can just be a circle of concern. Maybe your kids moved out and they don't listen to you anymore. And the only power we have is that control, is that one of ourselves. So one of the first lessons I learned is if I'm telling somebody else what to do, I need to pull that back to me and do it myself. I need to take and step into that. But here's where we're going today, because we're going to take the context into our character. When we are in the circle of influence and the circle of concern, those two aspects control who we are, how we act, how we come across. How many times have you heard it when somebody says, that's not me? That I'm not that kind of person. I don't know. I just flew off the handle. Or, gosh, I'm so depressed now. That's not me. And it's this circumstance. It's just changing who I am. You're in the victim. You're not owning it. Or my husband made me go do this thing. I had to go do this thing because they wanted to do it. That's in the victim. And so this is the disempowering. This is where you no longer own your character. You don't own how you act. And sometimes it's because we don't even know who we want to be. So it's easier to just let life dictate who we are. Yeah, everybody's mad these days, or everybody's complaining. So I might as well complain, or everybody suffers. So we just get in the same conversations about suffering and inability to move. I mean, we've all heard it. Drama gets attention, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's a true stat, but I've heard it so many times over decades that I've just kind of internalized it as a truth. And I have yet to find something that disagrees with it. But I have heard that something like negativity is 16 times more powerful than positivity. And
I believe it.
right? It's so funny to me because it's the one stat that I own that I have no real, like, I have no study to point to, right? I have no proof of that, but I hear it constantly. It's almost like a wives' tale or a colloquialism that was picked up. But you see it. The news headline of 16 puppies saved in a burning building for what was it? The rescue, the animal rescue, right? Like that's good news. And it played for 10 minutes versus really negative news that 100 people tragically perished in a flood in Texas, for example. Yes, that is really sad. And you will see that that plays much harder, much longer than any more positive news story. And it's because negativity sells. And that's the craziest part to me, and why I brought up the doom scrolling and the circle of concern versus control. Because, yes, it is in my circle of concern when puppies were rescued or people perished in a flood. Those are both in my circle of concern. And if I stay in there, I go into a victim mindset. Oh, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to the world? And you start spiraling because that is the survival cycle. The survival cycle is all, how do I survive? And when you're in the external loci of control and everything is happening to you outside of you, you feel like you're no longer in control in the situation. And so you allow everything outside of you to influence the inside of you, and you spiral. You go into survival.
It is all about survival, and we want connection. And the victim side of that is to have something that either to complain about or to have go wrong. You want sympathy, you want connection in whatever way you can get it. And that's the sanctioned way to get that connection. People will always bond over what's going wrong, and people want to help. And it can become dangerous because it's addictive to be in that victim state where there is less power and stuff isn't working for you and you need more help. And it's uncomfortable too. We don't want to be there. We want power. That's why we give other people advice. That's why we take in their drama, because it's not ours. And we can push out power or what we feel is power by telling other people what to do. But it's false power.
Yes. And just like you said, that's highly addictive. It's so interesting because that is what's coming up for me in this, is that this, of all the survival cycles that we've talked about so far, this is the one that's actually really addictive. This is the one that people love to hate because they love to be in it and they don't want to own that they like to be in it.
Well, why do we watch movies? There's
Right.
drama.
Right. We don't, soap operas haven't existed for 50 plus years because of the positive messages. It's the drama. It's the fact that they can make a negative story last for a week on end and have 6 episodes about. I mean, it is that appeal of the negativity of this kind of idea of, like you were talking about, like the attention, the sympathy. We learned as kids really early on that if we get a bruise or we get hurt or something negative happens to us, we get attention for it, good or bad, we get attention. And as kids that are actively looking for attention and to be the kids that we are, we're going to gravitate towards that. The problem is that then we learn it. It becomes a learned behavior. And so it becomes habit and patterns over time. And before you know it, you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s even, still acting like the 6-year-old that got attention because they scraped their knee on the concrete. And here's one more thing, and then I'm curious what you have to think on this, Jen. But here's the other thing, is that we're not judging this stage, because to me, this stage is addictive, but for the wrong reasons. This is a paramount part to be in, because by learning to recognize when we're giving up our power is the only way for us to become conscious of how to take that power back. And so, just like we talk about with the Carl Jung quote, the only way to move forward in life is to make the unconscious conscious. And this is a really big unconscious part, I think, collectively of society these days. We like to be in the circles of influence and concern because it is more addictive, because the negativity does get us attention. It might not get us change that we want, quote unquote, but it does get us the attention that we desire. And we are an attention craved society. Again, look at things like TikTok, Facebook, social media. We want to be seen. And so I think what ends up happening is just like you were talking about with this outward creative control, we start to act out. We start to do things outside of ourselves to try to give us this illusion that we have control, when in reality, it's all the more reason that we're getting pushed to go back to that circle of control, which is inside of us, and to do the work we need to do to move from the victim to stepping into our power. And that, to me, that process, and it is a process, it's a practice. You don't get it right, and you don't get it right every time. And it can show up in different areas of your life, but it is a process, it is a practice of personal responsibility, moving from the circles of influence and concern, which are more outside of you, and going and working your way inward to the circle of control.
Yeah. And it's hard to take our power because mistakes happen. Then we can blame ourselves. And then we end up back in that survival cycle because a mistake was made and we blame ourselves and we're the victim again. And so it's really hard to pull ourselves out of that state. And we want to be good people. Everybody wants, well, I won't say everybody, the majority of people want to be happy and healthy and in control of their lives and supportive of their friends and, you know, living, just living. And to realize that we are the victim is hard. We're the victim of our kids because we've got to take care of them. We're the victim of our pets that we choose to have. We're the victim of our spouse when they're upset, and even if it has nothing to do with you. And we don't realize that we are the victim of those things. We say, oh, I have to take my kid. No, then we're putting the onus on the fact that we chose to have kids. And it's a natural way of our speaking that gets in the way as well. But this is where we build the character. This is where we change. This is where we decide, who do we really admire? What characteristics do they have? Are they calm? Are they driven? What is the energy you want to hold? And we don't want to dictate that. We have our own that we want to live into. And it's a constant work. But as we start to look into things like our archetypes and to characters we like and our values, we push into that power. And this is where the real work happens because it's the first thing we're doing in the play mindset where people can see the action of it, how you're acting, how you're behaving. And it's the first time we can see whether circumstances are controlling us or we are moving from our inner strength, our inner choices, regardless of people and circumstances, regardless.
And you brought up a great point earlier about how this is all about building character. And it just keeps coming to mind that this is a process. To me, this is not a one and done thing. And this might be the eternal process, this one little part. But I mean, it's a constant act of becoming. And here's the crazy thing. I will own, even as we are walking through this entire thing together, that I'm a little on the cutting edge. Like I'm on the edge of this part, like of personal responsibility and victim and power mindset in my own life, like right now. And one of the things that is just screaming at me is that as I am choosing and intentionally cultivating the character of how I want to show up in the world, it feels like a homecoming. Like it feels like I am being more seen. And that's the craziest part of this is as you step into your power, I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, like I'm like right on the edge of this, right? But to me, it feels like a coming home almost. Like you are feeling more seen, more heard, because as you start to let go of the illusion of control and you actually step into true control and you move out of the victim and into the power mindset, what you start to realize is that the person you were being in that victim mindset wasn't really you, even though it felt real, because it was all learned behavior. It was all a character that you learned to build to survive up until that point. And that doesn't mean that every part of that character is wrong. And that's I'm like, why I see this as a process because you've got to reacquaint yourself with how you show up and the power you choose to have in your world. And so you start moving from things like blame, like learned helplessness into things like responsibility and agency. And there's a lot of internal power in that because now no longer and fun actually. That's the part that I'm really trying to get at. This is actually a really enlivening, enlightening up experience instead of going, oh, I didn't do that how I wanted to. It's like you almost have a smile on your face because you're like, well, that didn't work like I wanted it to. So now how can I tweak it? What can I do different next time? And it becomes gasp play.
Yeah. Well, and once you become the character you want to be, regardless of circumstances, there's a lot that you can do. If you're not pushed by the tides left and right, I'm happy now, I'm sad now, I'm angry now, and you can own the emotion and still act a different way, you have so much power in the world and you have so much more influence in the world because people come to you, they look to you. It becomes like magic. How are you unflappable? How? You know, it seems like the bomb could go off next to you and you would find a way to move through it and possibly cheerfully. What the hell? How do you do it? And, it's not the people who are respected are not Pollyanna. They're not happy about everything. They totally take the world as it is. That's why you need those first pieces of play mindset. You have to accept what is. You're not glossing it over. And you're still owning who you are in the moment. Do I have to rage at somebody because something went wrong? No. Do I have to get all pissed off about it and complain? No. I can look to the future. I could be like, this is what is. Yeah, it's not what I wanted. Kind of sucks, but what can we do with it? And people gravitate towards those people, the ones that are like, yes, reality. Let's do something. Let's be something. I've got your back. Or, hey, you're stepping out of line. This does not work for me. Maybe it's what you need right now, but it's not working for this instance. We need to bring it back together, people. And that's power. And you get respect for that. And all this magic happens around you because you just own a way of being, regardless of circumstances and people.
And I don't want to glaze over that last point you just made because you brought in another tool. I don't even know if you realize, but boundaries. Stepping in your power is healthy boundaries. But you also brought up another couple points that I think can be a good compass for the audience to know if they're in power or the victim mindset. One of the other qualities that you brought up of being in your own power is that you're solution focused. You were talking about how people gravitate towards you because you have ideas and ways of working through things. And I just want to point out too, putting on my business cap for a minute, the business side of it doesn't mean that the solution is perfect either, or that you have all the answers even. Sometimes the solution is asking people around you and getting feedback and advice. Sometimes the solution is acting on your own. Sometimes the solution is a more collaborative environment. It depends. But that discernment that comes up, like we talked about, and again, another tool comes into play. And what I'm hoping to highlight here is that the tools that we've already discussed all interconnect and all interrelate. And so, again, honor where you're at in whatever part of the cycle because it all comes back and it all builds on itself. And the reason for that is because when you start to step into the survival cycle as a whole, you begin to cultivate things like resilience and motivation and empowerment because all of a sudden your focus is no longer on what's going on outside of you, although it might cause you to respond in a different way. But really, what's happening is you're like, okay, this happened. Where's my control in this? What can I do? And one of the greatest, I've toyed with whether to share this on the podcast or not, but fuck it. So a while ago, I lost my job. I got laid off because our company went under. And it wasn't, and I'm still laid off. I'm working on things and, Jen and I have some ideas. And so there's already things in place. And what I'm trying to get at is that when you are in your fulfillment cycle and you are in power, when those things happen, your focus shifts. You're on the solutions, you're on the empowerment. Where's my responsibility? Where's my agency in this? What can I do? And that doesn't mean that what happened to you is any less shitty or bad. It just means I'm not letting that dictate how I move forward. And that is really, really, really.
That is super hard. And it is the ownership of this happened. And, sometimes we have a sense these things are happening and we're just kind of holding off on them. And so, but if you're in the victim cycle, your entire body reacts as if you had no idea it was coming at all, ever. That you were going to have a job till your pension came in and Social Security, and it was never going to happen. And if you're in your power, you see these things coming. And when they happen, you're not blown away by them, and you don't pretend to be blown away by them because you can know they're going to happen, but when they happen, you can go completely into the victim because of the sympathy and the addiction and the complaining that people are like, that sucks, dude. And they really gave you a shitty, and they should have told you more. And that's easy to go to. The power is going, yeah, I saw it coming and it still sucks.
That is it right there. It doesn't suck any less because obviously I'm not getting a paycheck, but I smirked. Like I laughed a little when they told me because I already had so many things in place for when this happened because I wasn't in the victim mindset with this. And that's just it too. So I was in my fulfillment cycle at work. I saw this coming. I had my resume already ready to go. I was already interviewing with other jobs. I mean, there were already steps in place of empowerment. And I still honored anything that came up for me. And that's something that I really want to just emphasize here because I didn't ignore any negativity. It's not like they announced it and I laughed and then I just moved on with my life, right? I give my body and myself the time to process whatever came up. Because here's the thing, it's not that the emotions themselves won't come up or that they're bad. It's what you choose to do with them when they arise. And that's where the empowerment comes in. Do I just sit in it and do I just let it ruminate? And do I just jump into the void of being upset and depressed that I lost a job and that whatever my inner critic was telling me at the time that I could have done something different, that I failed or this, that, or the other thing? Or do I just own and honor that that's what I'm feeling, let myself feel and express that, but I still make decisions from my power? And that's where I think non-judgment is really powerful because it's like I can be in whatever emotion I need to be in, and I'm still doing the things that I know I need to do to cast that positive shadow and to celebrate my own humanity in this case.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example of personal responsibility. This is the tool. There is the ownership of, I feel an emotion and I have a life still. I have a partner still. There are things that need to be done. And in the case of a job loss, I have time.
Yeah. That time thing.
Yeah, rebel of delight. I'm always looking at that. Hey, what's the frosting on the cake that I could go with?
No, I agree. And taking this back to the character, here's the crazy part is that this was not unexpected to me, but when it happened was unexpected. And I hope that kind of makes sense. Like I knew it was coming, I just didn't know when. And so when it actually happened, there was a moment of shock, but then there was a moment of choice and it happened almost instantaneously, right? It wasn't like it was like in the moment, in the call, when the conversation was happening. And that's where I feel the character comes in because character isn't just something that is decided on. Wait, let me make sure I say this right. Character is something that is cultivated over time so that when those moments happen, you have more choices available to you. Because here's the thing, when that happened, I could have still chosen, even with the character development that I have done, I still could have chosen to go back into all my old patterns of behavior, my depression, my victimhood, my hermiting, my whatever. And instead, I chose to lean into it and go through the process of whatever came up. And because of that, now just on the outside of a few weeks after this happened, I feel more aligned and well adjusted with where I want to go in my life than I even did before when I was in that job. And it's because the character had a chance to come through and make a different choice. And I made that choice. And that's where personal responsibility comes in. And the idea would be that this would become second nature to you at some point. But for me, it's still a very active process. But what was cool is that in that moment, it was active for me. It wasn't reactionary, it was a response. This happened. Okay, Dave, you see two possibilities right now. You can jump all in and to the negativity and get the attention, or you can honor what you're feeling, work through it, and make different choices. And that's what I decided. And that's what I've been doing. And so for me, that's the power of personal responsibility. It's not glamorous. It's not glorious all the time. Sometimes it's choosing to cultivate your own inner happiness and your own resilience, even when things around you are kind of doing their thing.
And this is the key point, I think. Dave's talking about a more extreme example. Those are hard. And so you want to work on your personal responsibility when it's small. You're in a Starbucks and there's a long line. Can you just chill with that? Maybe you want to be angry. Maybe you're in a hurry. Can you feel that energy in you? Take responsibility for it and choose to be okay with waiting in line. You might still feel like you're in a rush, but can you be calm and nice and generous with baristas? Maybe they're having a good day and chatting it up, and you're like, I'm going to be late for our meeting. You're cultivating, you're working on a practice. So when something big happens that blows up your life, you have that choice. If you haven't been doing the practice, it's not going to work. It's just not. It hasn't been practiced enough to be able to handle that huge thing. It's like learning to drive a car. If they threw you out on the highway for the first day, you wouldn't be able to handle all the cars going everywhere, left and right, zooming on. No, you start in like a parking lot, where you just learn to go and stop, go and stop. Don't use any of like the turn signals or any of that stuff. It's just, can you make it go and can you hit the brake? And so you have to take responsibility for that too. You have to honor that you have to start small, that you have to do it when it doesn't matter at all. And you have to practice it over and over and over.
No notes. Let her cook.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. And captures what I was trying to say. And I don't think I said as well. So thank you for like expanding on that. That's exactly it, right? This was a big situation, like a big picture kind of situation that happened with this. This was a really big deal. And it was only because I've done all the little things over the time that I could choose to have a different response here and handle it differently. And another point that I think I maybe glossed over, but I really want to emphasize here is that was just in that area of my life, right? So in business and in my career, I was able to be in the fulfillment cycle at that point, but maybe somewhere else I'm not, or I'm in a different part of the survival or fulfillment cycle. And so what you learn is that in different areas of your life, you can be in different parts, but all the tools connect, just like we were talking about. So maybe in your relationship, you're more in I don't know, like I'm drawing a blank on all of them. Maybe you're more in like a discomfort area with them where it's a brand new relationship. And so, you got to dress up nicely for each date and you're rehearsing what you're going to say in your head and what you're not going to say and how you're going to act and all these kind of things. And so it's uncomfortable because it's unknown, but the tools that you learn there all cultivate and help you build tools for other areas of your life. Does that make sense? Am I making okay?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And you could be in your fulfillment cycle in one area and in your survival cycle in another. But you could break yourself out. It's the practice. Hopefully you're in a whole bunch of fulfillment cycles with one area that breaks into the survival cycle. And then you can grow the tool, to get yourself back out. It's really hard when everything's in survival. There's no aspect of your life that's in fulfillment at all. And then there's just a lot of work. There's just a lot of, and that's when you practice on the tool itself instead of the specific part of your life. It's the practice of, okay, just accept, and just practicing that tool. And then as the tool grows and you actually move into the fulfillment cycle, it's that celebrating humanity. You see other people who don't take a situation well, and you're like, it's okay. I totally know, been there. I will hold space for you and I will stand my power. I will not join you in your complaining, but I will be there with you.
And, one thought that came to mind here, as you have these conversations with others and with yourself, limit the amount of texting that happens with this, because there is make it as personal as possible. Even if it's on the phone call, a Zoom call, or in person, you guys go on a walk, you have a coffee, like wherever the situation is that you can have a more physical interaction with this, that's how you really celebrate the humanity part of it too. So, because what happens is when you're in this fulfillment cycle and you're actually doing the tools, that doesn't always come across great in texting. So and Jen's laughing because like we've witnessed this between each other and with people we've worked with. So just kind of keep that in mind, that as you start to change your speech, because it's going to change as you step more into your power, the way you come across is going to have to change as well. And what we have found, at least, is that the more personal and the more face time you have with those kind of interactions, the it's a more positive outcome.
Yeah. The text loses the softness that you're developing, and it comes across as distant, non caring, not disassociated. What's the word? Uh, Non attached. Like you're just floating outside of it.
Yeah.
Detached. It it's like you don't care through text. But if you're talking, there's a softness. I understand where you're coming from, and we'll go through this. I'm not going to complain with you. You're not saying these words, but it's in the voice. I'm not going to complain, but I see where you are. And in text, that just does not come across. You're just a dick. So yeah, I fully agree. Go with Dave on this. Get away from text. I know younger generations like millennials and Gen Z really like the text. Just don't. Get voice.
Yep. Get voice for sure. I think I have a fun challenge this week for our audience too with this. Okay. So here's what I would like the audience to do. This week has been all about personal responsibility. We have referenced almost, if not every, previous tool and cycle and cultivated quality that we've discussed so far. So what I would encourage the audience to do this week as part of your challenge is to step into your own personal responsibility, step into your own circle of control, and do a quick evaluation. Pick an area of your life where you feel that you aren't feeling as fulfilled as you would like, and see where you're at in this play mindset cycle. And then, as part of their personal responsibility, because that's only half of it, right? That's the internal. We said that this is internal and external. The external part of this is picking one small action that you can take that cultivates either personal responsibility, discernment, non-judgment, any of these other tools that we've talked about, and to focus on doing that once a day. Doesn't have to be big, can be something small, but the idea is that you are starting to build the character that you desire in yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great challenge, and it moves people in the right direction. It's up to you how you want to be. So you may need to start with, how do I want to be? Go to characters on TV, go to stuff when you like somebody and the way they act, practice that. Do that in the world. Even when it's not the right setting, things are going bad, still do that character arc. Anyway, yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening this week. We hope that you enjoyed this content. Let us know what you're thinking. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you did on the challenge this week or any previous weeks. Make sure to share us out to your friends and family, and give us a subscribe. Drop a like for this podcast. And until next time,
See ya.